Hello, Read 585, and thank you for joining me back for part two of our lectures this week. We are talking about the role of professional learning communities in school change and teacher learning. As you know, PLCs are a hot topic in education right now, but what are they and what constitutes a high functioning PLC? This is what we're going to talk about. And then as a result, we should see you applying these principles to part three of your assignment. Our objectives are for you to, this is carryover from last week, formulate a structure for developing, delivering, I'd say, sustaining professional support. So last week we looked at different approaches, both in the classroom and out of the classroom, for developing, teacher learning and expertise. So thinking about how you want to structure those experiences. And then this week, we're adding the layer of PLCs and what makes them high functioning. And you should be adding this to the structure that you were thinking about last week for your assignment. Resources that I draw from heavily on the topic of PLCs. First, this book, Getting Started, Reculturing Schools to Become Professional Learning Communities by Robert Eaker and the Dufours. This is really their foundational work on the subject of PLCs. It's a little bit dated now, copyrighted 2002, but a good tool to have. I think even better than this, though, this is more of a practical workbook. It is Building a Professional Learning Community at Work, a guide to the first year. And pretty much what it does is it starts summer and it takes you through everything that should be done in summer. Then it moves on to fall, things you should accomplish in fall. And it starts at the very beginning. And it actually aligns to the reading for this week. It starts with formulating that shared vision and mission. And then from there, setting up the core team. And then from there, how to build trust. So this is a very practical implementation tool for getting PLCs up and running. And then once you have your PLCs up and running, this is for really increasing their effectiveness. So called Learning by Doing, a handbook for professional learning communities at work. So now that we have things up and running, how do we really refine and enhance, our system, our structure? So this is a great follow-up to that. So that's what a lot of the content and materials I use on PLCs come from. So first of all, what is a PLC? A professional learning community. Chapter 8 that you are reading gives you a nice breakdown of this by looking at, the words that comprise PLC. Professional. A professional is someone who has expertise in a field. A professional is a member of a group in which a body of knowledge is held. Members of this group collaborate with one another in an effort to achieve their own personal goals and the goals of the profession at large. So this is critical to keep in mind. The first word in professional learning community is professional, recognizing that everyone has expertise in the field, and the way that we can grow and develop is by, as a group, building on the individual knowledge to have, a bigger level of knowledge, and then that way we can really work on the goals of the profession at large. Next word is learning. This implies that everyone within the PLC should be an active learner. They are in the process of ongoing learning that helps them continuously reflect and seek improvement. And then lastly, community brings with it a sense of belonging and collective responsibility. In an authentic professional learning community, educators create an environment that fosters mutual cooperation, emotional support, and personal growth. So the idea of collaboration, which as we've seen in articles thus far, is essential for school change. I love this quote about the purpose of PLCs. It says that teams serve a unique purpose, and when they are performing at high levels, as we hope your PLCs will, they are generative. They create new knowledge. So, right, two heads are better than one. So, even though you may have expertise as a professional, we can really build our knowledge by learning together and through our community. So, they create new knowledge, they stimulate energy, right, motivation, accountability, and promote improvement in ways that individuals acting in isolation could not achieve. So, we don't want to have, silos of success in our school, but a really collaborative, thriving, generative community. Love this video from Rick Dufour. He talks about the difference between a group and a team, because you may say to me or yourself that, my school or site or case study here does have professional learning communities. But do they really? Do they have groups that meet together and talk about field trips and other logistics? Or is it truly a team generating new knowledge? So let's take a look at this video here.
There is a difference in a team. We ask people to define
good point there at the end. You might be the Michael Jordan of teaching, but if your students only have 1 year with a good teacher, is that going to be enough? And that just further emphasizes why we need to really build effective teams and effective schools. So love this video to further articulate the difference between groups and teams, which is a key idea with professional learning communities. Now, I showed this video at a recent professional development I led, and someone argued with me that this wasn't accurate and that marathon runners are part of a team. And so I asked her to elaborate on this. And if you're familiar or have done a marathon or a half marathon, you know that there are different people who are pacers, and they run, and this is what she did. And she ran at a certain pace so that those who have a certain goal to run at that pace can stick with her. And therefore, their performance is interdependent on her performance and vice versa. So in that way, they're working more as a team. They're encouraging each other, they're motivating each other, they're running together versus runners in isolation. So I said, okay, I see what you're saying. I do believe there are instances where runners could be working as a team and not a group. So further food for thought there for you. All right, so this is what a PLC is. Why are they important? Well, studies have shown that implementing PLCs have significantly increased student achievement. What studies? Well, a few of them you've actually read in this class. So there they are again. Fisher and Fry, my faves, who took the lowest performing school in the SD area and made API growth targets for each subgroup every year, 1995 to 2005, because of implementing PLCs 2 times a month. Mokhtari, Toma, and Edwards took a school off the watch list in 1 year because of PLCs focused on collaborative data analysis and use, routine meeting times, opportunities to manage data, and having group norms that foster collaboration and relational trust. Some things you haven't read are these studies, which found that there is evidence to suggest that those communities that engage in structured, sustained, supported instructional discussions and that investigate the relationships between instructional practice and student work, so basically the kinds of conversations you should be having as a PLC, produce significant gains in student learning. Even more impressive, Phillips 2003 found that achievement scores significantly increased over a 3-year time span. Remember, we're talking about sustained improvement over time, right? Not just trying something out for 6 months to a year, expecting dramatic results, and then moving on to the next, silver bullet. But so this school saw an increase on ratings on statewide standardized tests from 50% passing to over 90% in the 3 years there. So pretty impressive results. So what features make for a powerful PLC? You can read about each of these in the assigned reading. First, they have shared values, mission, vision, and goals. So if your school site doesn't currently have that, that is where you need to start. You cannot have a school community or start working as one until you all agree upon a set of key principles for the direction that you're going. Next, the PLC has a commitment to collective inquiry and learning, and also the application of this learning to teaching. And the way they do that, I'll show you a slide in a minute, is by really focusing on the questions of what are we doing? Is it working? How do we know? So doing action research, engaging in collective inquiry, and then, if we find out that what we're doing isn't effective, doing the learning to figure out what needs to change. Powerful PLCs also have supportive conditions for continuous improvement. So, once the researchers come in and set up your school communities, as we read about in one of the articles, what systems do you have in place to ensure that they continue and thrive thereafter? So there needs to be a commitment from leadership. There needs to be a structure that actively supports teachers and gives them a way to have the collaboration and the discussion and the reflection and do the learning, and then continuously do that. Fourth, they have collaboration for collective success. So in order to do this, team members have to trust each other to give kind and respectful feedback assistance. There really needs to be a collegial atmosphere in the school, and that helps, building that interdependence. It's not just about me being the Michael Jordan of teaching, but how can my success help your success and vice versa? And then lastly, there needs to be a strong leadership and supportive and shared power. So administration team is key. They need to nurture improvement. They need to make sure that all voices are heard, distribute the power. They should be engaging in constructive conversations about the change process. So again, you can read more about that in chapter 8. Now, where they go from here is they talk about how to grow your PLC. And as we know, one of the key features that makes PLCs powerful is first to have shared values, mission, and vision. And that's where they recommend that you start. So in your plan, if your school doesn't currently have this and not everyone is bought in, this is where you need to start with your initial meetings, coming up with the mission, which is the why do we exist? What is our purpose? The vision. So what must our school become to accomplish this? So this is why we exist, and what do we need to do in order to be this? Our values. So how must we behave to achieve our vision, our collective commitment? So what are our values of reading instruction? What are we going to all agree to do in reading? The how that's going to help us accomplish the what and the why. And then lastly, the goals. The SMART goals with targets and timelines that help you monitor the progress you're doing. So this is the starting place for PLCs. Once you've done this, they recommend empowering a core team, which we saw happen in many of the supplementary articles, which is a way to distribute the leadership, right? They empowered a core group of teachers to do a lot of the thinking and planning and then delivering of the information. So it's coming from within. It's not coming from top down. Once you have your core team, then the next step is to create trust. And I love this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It talks about, what gets in the way of getting results with teams. And the first thing, foundational thing, is absence of trust. If you do not trust those you work with, you are not going to truly engage with them in this essential collaborative process. Trust is essential in order to have conflict. So beyond an absence of trust, fear of conflict gets in the way of success. So if I don't trust you, I'm not going to, feel comfortable expressing my ideas, even if they are contradictory to what you're saying. Oftentimes conflict has a negative connotation. We're not talking about malicious conflict, but, in order to get to the next level of success, I need to be able to share with you my true thoughts and feelings, even if it's going to cause a little bit of conflict or disagreement with what you say, but I can't do that if I don't have trust. So trust is critical so that, I can voice my opinions freely, because if I don't, air my, grievances, then I'm not going to commit to the decision we made. If our quote team is making a decision that I don't agree with, but I don't have the trust to say that, I'm not going to buy in to that decision. And if I'm not bought into the decision, then I'm not going to be very accountable, and I'm not going to want to be held accountable because I never agreed or bought into this to begin with. And if we can't hold people accountable to their commitments, then we're never going to get the results we want. So starting way down here with trust, it's essential to get conflict, to get the buy-in and commitments, to then, if you don't have commitments, what are you holding people accountable to? And if you aren't holding anyone accountable to anything, then you're definitely not getting results. So this is a great little book written as a fable, actually. So it's a real quick read that goes over this idea of, what interferes with team success. So once you've set up your teams and you've started building trust, the next step is to establish norms that dictate how teams are going to work together. Now, these norms should be coming from within the teams, not from a dictator, but each team should create its own norms. Items that should be included in your norms are promoting open dialogue, right? So that we can get the discourse needed to make these team decisions and agreements. So that might mean if you disagree with something, you need to speak up. Next is holding people accountable. If we make commitments and we never return to them or, bring in results, then we're definitely not going to get results. And then lastly, for clarifying expectations. Norms should be written as commitments and not beliefs. They should be reviewed at the start and end of each meeting for at least 6 months, and then teams should formally evaluate their effectiveness at least twice a year in regard to their norms. Now, once you have your teams built, they have their norms that frame how they operate. We need to think about the kinds of things they're discussing in their PLC. So they're really focused on these 4 questions. And I love this quote here that says, test scores will take care of themselves when schools and the people within them are passionately committed to helping each student develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions essential to his or her success. So if we are really thinking about the students and talking about them and how to give them the knowledge and skills they need, then they're going to perform well on the test. So when we sit down as a PLC, we need to constantly be talking about what do we want our students to learn? How will we know that they have learned it? So what is the assessment or measure of progress or observation or note card, exit ticket we're going to give to know that? How will we respond when they do not learn? And then how will we respond if they do learn? How will we extend that? And so these are the things that we are discussing. And then how does the PLC fit into this bigger process? So we start with gathering evidence of current levels of student learning, just as was done with your assignment 2, looking at the data and what it shows about current levels. Then we need to develop strategies and ideas to build on strengths and address weaknesses in that learning. Again, what has already been done for your assignment. Then we need to implement those strategies and ideas and analyze the impact of the changes and discover what was effective and what was not. And I also love this quote, what gets monitored gets done. So, if you have no way of measuring whether or not what you're focusing so much energy on, people aren't really going to want to do it. There's no way to know if you're getting results or not. And then lastly, applying new knowledge in the next cycle of continuous improvement. So this is the structure that I recommend schools follow in order to have a true PLC cycle of continuous school improvement. So it starts here with analyzing the student achievement data. From there, we define our team goals. We create our SMART goals. Then we identify practices and develop an action plan. So we know we want to focus on this, so these are the steps we're going to take. Perhaps we need to do some additional professional learning. So we're going to study those practices and how they can best be implemented. Then we're going to, implement for some time, agreed upon by everyone. Formatively monitor the student learning as well as the teacher practice. So we need to be seeing, the impact on the student learning and an impact on teacher practice. And then lastly, evaluate and report the progress to the goal. So, after we've implemented and monitored for some time, maybe tweaked some things and gone back to implementing and monitoring, ultimately, how did we do in regard to our goal? And then we can start this cycle again. So what is this cycle? It's really action research, identifying a causal link between practices and student achievement. It's also professional development because it's closing the knowing-doing gap by actually studying and effectively implementing best practices. So by analyzing the data, you identify some weaknesses and some points for improvement. And then once you do that, you're thinking about how can I change those? What is going to be our action plan, our next steps? And, what learning can I do to better understand what that looks like for me in my classroom with my group of students? So that professional development is going to occur, but also because we're monitoring it, it's more likely that we're going to actually do something about it. We're not just going to sit and learn about these things and develop our knowledge and not actually implement them. And then the PLC process is also targeted intervention because you're setting achievement goals and then providing tailored instruction to identify students. So this works hand in hand with the intervention process. Just want to make sure that everyone is clear on setting a SMART goal because that is strongly tied to the work of the PLC. Once they analyze that data, they're creating a SMART goal, which stands for specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and time-bound. So looking at the goal of students will read fluently, that isn't very specific because it doesn't really show us what fluently means. What's the measure there? There's also no, deadline. So the revised way of saying this could be by June 2015, 85% of grade 3 students will read with 97% plus accuracy at a rate of 100 words correct per minute and a score of 3 out of 4 or better on Rosinski's multidimensional fluency scale, which incorporates these things. So this has a deadline. It's way more specific, way more measurable. And we hope that it is, realistic in that we looked at our current level of performance, our data, in order to develop this. So here is that PLC process again, looking at student achievement data, making your SMART goal. And once these have happened, we're ready to make that action plan and identify what things we're going to start doing, stop doing, or do a little bit better. So advocates of professional learning communities say that they take time to grow. You can't expect to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Development may or may not be planned, and they may vary in their makeup in particular aspects, or they may be successful only partially in pockets of schools. So it really takes time to grow your PLC. Michael Fullen described the school change model as going through a discrete series of stages. So first, schools decide to initiate change, then they operationalize the change, and then the process becomes instituted. So that looks like this: initiation, where they initially adopt a new innovation, and then implementation, they begin, to implement, improve their practice, and then it really becomes part of their institution. Growth of a team, so there are stages of team development. You got to spend some time really forming your team. Who are the members? What are they contributing? How does each contribute? What are the roles? And then you're going to spend some time storming as we, learn how, we need to work together. Then we're able to norm. We come to terms with, this is how it's going to be. We can, make agreements together, get some consensus building, and then we perform. So again, it doesn't just happen overnight. As we saw in the research study, they were looking for implementation of PLCs for a 3-year time frame. Definitely the initial year is just about getting them up and running, the structure, and then the second year is building on that. I helped a school implement PLCs at different grade levels, and so we went through this process of analyzing data and creating a goal. Here's a goal from a second grade team. It is focused on math, but 80% of second grade students will receive a 3.0, so they use scoring scales, or higher on the end of the unit addition subtraction test by November 2nd. So these were all the different things, the practices they implemented. The biggest thing was utilizing the formative assessment process. So they actually gave a pre-test on the skills that they would be assessing on the end. And then from their pre-test, they made a very targeted unit plan to address the needs of their students. As a result, on the 4 different objectives measured by this unit assessment, all of them were 80% or higher in each of the 3 classes. So they got really strong results. They felt like the process was informative. It can direct your instruction. They were able to reach their goals. So imagine, the buy-in when you see the success there. But they saw a pitfall is you really need to have a lot of forethought in order to make and implement the pre-test before you make the lesson. So you need to allow yourself enough time to develop the pre-test, give it, analyze the results, and then from there, collaborate with your team on the results. So there are a lot of tools available for building PLCs. There's rubrics in our reading this week. Solutiontree.com has all of the reproducibles from those 2 different handbooks I shared. The PLC reflection form is here. This is an awesome tool I use to get teams started thinking about, what does a traditional teacher team look like versus what does a true professional learning team look like? Which characteristics can our school site improve upon? What can we celebrate? What's intimidating? What can we start working on today? Once teams do that, I recommend they take a look at this collaboration survey, which, starts getting definitions, shared definitions for these different terms. What's collaboration? What's content? What's assessment? What are our instructional strategies? What's our student achievement data? So this, helps teams articulate the values and the how we're going to achieve our goal. And then it has them rate the current situation. So as a learning team, are we currently doing all of these things? If not, what do we want to focus on? What are our future goals? So this is a pretty comprehensive kind of self-evaluation tool that teams can complete initially. Another one is the team agenda template. This is good for helping teams really focus their meetings on, topics that are, I'm pointing with my finger, not the mouse, topics that are aligned to the school mission and vision. So, these are our topics for our meeting today. How are they aligned to our school's mission and vision? Because if not, they shouldn't be part of our PLC meeting time. What's our current reality? What do we need to do moving forward? Who's responsible? When will this be finished? And then time for celebration. And then I love at the end how it has you monitor the effectiveness of the meeting. On a scale of 1 to 3, were we focused? Do we know our next steps? Was this a valuable use of time? What feedback do you have? Because if people don't strongly agree to these things, then they're not going to see value in actually meeting as a professional learning community. Here's a team action planning template that you can use. What's our area of focus? Why is this our area of focus? What's our SMART goal going to be? So essentially walking you through the steps in that stage. How are we going to monitor our progress? What additional skills or learning do we need? So this really walks you through that process, that cycle for continuous improvement that I showed you. And then lastly is a data talk protocol. And this is nice for helping you structure your data conversations. So what's our kind of inquiry-based question? What are some preconceptions we have about that? And then making sure that individual constituents prepare their data set ahead of time. So, how do you want them to prepare their data? And then how are you going to talk about the results? And from the interpretation of the results, what are your next steps going to be? Write a summary of, what surprised us, what are we convinced of, what do we wonder as a result of our conversation, what are we going to do, that big action planning piece. So those are some of my favorite tools from Solution Tree. There's an abundance of those online, and there are a lot of other authors who have great tools as well. So there you have it. Talking about using a PLC process for continuous school improvement and how we can take these principles of having the shared mission and vision, which, as we know from previous reading, is so important. So, how do we go through these stages and apply these characteristics of a well-functioning PLC to our site? All right, to leave you, I have a quote. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader, from John Quincy Adams. And it is my hope that the work of the PLC can truly be inspirational in this way, that, together the teams can be, dreaming more about, a better reality or a brighter future for the students. And then together they can learn more about how to build that. And they can do more. They can make agreements and commitments to each other and implement new and exciting best practices, and then become more. So your job as the leader is to now go and start to get PLCs up and running in your school, which is no easy feat, but remember, it takes time, and you'll see definite stages of development, and that's okay. It's okay. You got to make the commitment to do this over a sustained amount of time, not just in 1 year. All right, everyone, I hope you have a great week. This concludes our lecture for week 10.